Thanks, everyone. So I am going to be talking about how to retain and work with disruptive employees. So a little bit from just bridging from Hema's talk about emotions. There can be a lot of emotions, especially in a time when we are thinking about a potential recession, or for some industries, they may even say we are in a recession. And so, as you're thinking about how to recession-proof your medical practice, this is an important piece in that, which is really looking at your personnel and your team and to figure out, you know, what to do, especially when you're having difficulties with some difficult members of your team. Really quick about me, I'm Aashi Arora. My company is iRise Executive Coaching. I have over 20 years of experience in leadership roles in healthcare around medical practice management. I worked alongside a variety of different medical specialties in terms of coaching, mentoring, hiring, setting up programs, mergers and acquisitions. But what I do now is primarily coach around conflict, whether that's individuals or teams. So guiding professionals to transport conflict into collaboration, which is big part of the talk here I have for you today. So the problem is disruptive employees are a hidden threat to your practice. We know this. So let's start with defining what a disruptive employee is or who that is. This is a bit of a subjective term. What might seem disruptive to me may not be disruptive to you. So take a moment and just think about who is someone or what are certain behaviors that you find may be first negative. So thinking about disruption as a negative type of behavior. Secondly, are misaligned with the behaviors, with the culture of your practice, your organization, your company. And third, and most important, are creating a barrier to the goals of your practice, the goals of what you, maybe as the medical professional, the medical practice owner, or even one of the medical leaders in a practice, are finding is a barrier to success of that practice. And we all know about some of these behaviors, right? We've seen them. They could include certain body language, the eye rolling. That's one of my favorite ones that comes up a lot. It could be the condescending tone, where someone's not elevating their voice, but it's what I call the you dummy language. If the way they say something, you can add the words you dummy at the end, they are being condescending and potentially putting you down. It could be their communication style. It might be very loud. It might be snappy, lots of attitude, interruptions. Sometimes I've even heard some medical practice leaders say someone being too quiet, not answering, not making something important enough, not showcasing that something is important can also be disruptive. Another disruptive behavior might be them not being present, not being engaged, seeming to just do the bare minimum of the work and not more or less. And then lastly, and this is a big one, I know, gossipy nature. And that can also be incredibly disruptive. So what do? You need to retain them. And especially in this environment where there are so many employees that you may have that have really great technical knowledge. They're intelligent. Maybe they meet a certain critical need of the practice. One of my dental clients says in the East Coast is saying that dental hygienists are very difficult to recruit. So when they become disruptive, it's very difficult to decide to just go down the performance route because it's really difficult to recruit them. And so in thinking about this important topic, it's like, when firing is not the answer, when performance management is not working, what else can you do? So I have a different perspective on this, and it's about your own mindset. Now, what I mean by mindset is not ignoring the behavior, okay, which is a tactic many medical professionals and practitioners do, or the other tactic being direct, and that's not working either, right? So it's shifting your mindset and your attitude and your thoughts about the person and separating the person from the behavior. So looking at this as this employee is disruptive and shifting that to, okay, the behaviors that they're exhibiting are disruptive. What is happening here? And so my opportunity to you, if you can think about this as an opportunity, is what if a disruption is a strength in disguise? So thinking about that for a minute, thinking about that it may, instead of looking at the lens of someone creating disruptive behaviors as a weakness, thinking about it in a different context of what if there's strengths in disguise and I'm missing them? What can I do differently to amplify the strengths and de-escalate and minimize the weaknesses, minimize those behaviors that we're seeing that we don't want to see happening in the workplace. So what's a strength? A strength is performing at near perfect performance. And so going back to understanding, why do you keep these employees? You know, what is it about them that makes you feel like, okay, I really can't get rid of them, or I don't want to get rid of them? What are the strengths that they exhibit that makes you want to stay with them? So thinking about retention is really the most cost-effective strategy you can use. And I know some of you are going to look at this and go, wait a minute, a bad body is worse than a no body. I get it. But what I'm trying to tell you to think about is, have you really looked at assessing everything about this person as being a bad body? Or are there other ways that we can look at leveraging some of their strengths to help them behave better so their performance overall improves? Now, you don't have to believe me about the cost of firing. It's all over the data that it is going to cost you much more to fire and rehire than it is to try to work with your disruptive employees. So how do you start working with your disruptive employees? Well, one of the first tactics is you think about what are their strengths and how to recognize those strengths in action. So start with kind of just observing the behaviors, right? Think about, what do they naturally gravitate towards or excel at? And the answer is not they gravitate towards the drama and the gossip. Okay, I've heard that as well. No, really reflect on, why did you hire them in the first place? What did you see them excelling at? What caught your attention when they were interviewing? What do others see as their strengths? Maybe talk to some of the people you feel safe enough talking to in your group, whether it's one of your other clinical practitioners, one of the other leaders, one of the other managers, one of the other staff members. Hey, what do you rely on so and so for? What do you see that they do really well? And what do they seem most energized? When do they seem most energized or engaged? One of the biggest challenges in where we see a lot of disruptive behaviors erupt is this concept around engagement. So what is engagement? An employee is engaged when they really feel excited and motivated to show up at work and go above and beyond. Now, sadly, the Gallup surveys show that only about 33% on average of employees are in that engaged category. The majority of employees are in what we call disengaged. So there's engaged, disengaged, and actively disengaged. Now, the actively disengaged, if those disruptive behaviors are so severe that you can't even figure out what strengths this person has, then that's really the performance route, and you want to consult your HR professional / employment attorney to discuss that. But most disruptive behaviors I see is in that bucket of disengaged employees, where they may just be doing the bare minimum, kind of skirting by, and you can still find some strengths, but they're not excited and motivated to go above and beyond like the engaged employees are. So now there's a lot of reasons around this, and I could do a whole talk on culture and organizational culture, but it is something to think about, which is what in your environment and your culture may be leading them to not feel as engaged and energized and motivated. So thinking about, how do you speak to them? What values do you set in the practice? How much do you, as the leader and as the doctor or the doctor in charge, exemplify those values? So if you want your employees to act respectful, are you acting respectful? If you want them to communicate clearly, are you communicating clearly? I mean, this all gets back to the culture of the practice that you're creating, as well as the behaviors that you're modeling. So thinking about how am I engaging, how am I shifting the behavior from disengage to engage? And one of the most powerful tools to do that is to help an employee understand their strengths and to be helping them lean into those strengths. So the so the first and foremost way is first recognizing, right? Recognizing what are their strengths, what are those in action. So you can write them down yourself, you can survey people around, you can ask them directly, you can have a conversation with the disruptive employee and say, hey, today I just want to have a strength, I want to have a conversation around what do you like about working here? What do you like about working here? What do you enjoy doing? What do you think people rely on you for? What are the type of activities that get you most energized or engaged? So those are three ways to figure out what a person's strengths are. The fourth way is what's called the Clifton Strengths Assessment. And if you want more information about that, I'm happy to provide that to you, but I'm not going to get too far into that in this talk. And the Clifton Strengths Assessment is an assessment by Gallup where you can actually have your employee take the assessment and discover what their strengths are. You yourself as a leader can take the assessment and discover what your strengths are. And what's most powerful in that assessment is really understanding what are natural behavioral tendencies for you and the employees that are in your organization. And that can really help you understand why maybe your communication is off, why you're not collaborating well, why certain behaviors are showing up that aggravate you, may not aggravate others, may seem disruptive. And a lot of information can be gathered and worked on through that assessment. But anyways, in lieu of that assessment, you can document it yourself. You can ask teams around you. You can ask the employee directly. So 3 steps to turn disruption into contribution. You want to take that employee that is probably disengaged to move them to engagement. So observe the employee's natural tendencies and patterns of behavior. Maybe try to figure out like what triggers some of these behaviors. When are they eye rolling? When are they gossiping? Where are you hearing this is happening? When are they snapping at you? When are they potentially snapping at your patients? What's going on behind the scenes? Is it something outside of work that they're bringing into work? Is it maybe during certain meetings? Do they feel unprepared maybe when you ask them a question in a team huddle? And then they snap because it becomes a defense mechanism. The other big trigger, why? If I can train anyone on anything else, it's to eliminate the why in leadership and move it to what. And what does that mean? Collectively, we can ask questions about why. But when you're having a one-on-one conversation with an employee, especially one that exhibits disruptive behaviors, ask what questions instead of why questions. And not what questions that are facetious, like, what were you thinking when you spoke to the patient that way? More like, what was happening? What may have triggered your response to that patient? What was the patient doing right before you spoke to them? And so you can get more information and also get the person to reflect on what's happening, because when they can control the narrative and the conversation and they don't feel like their ego is being questioned with the why question, they're more likely to open up and speak more naturally to you, and you might get some more information. So observe. The second step is reframe. Help them see how their behavior could be a strength when applied differently. So most people come into healthcare very, very purpose-driven, mission-driven. So you may see it as the doctor or the leader in the practice as they just don't care the way I care. And you'd be surprised. They probably do care just in a different way, or they're being triggered to certain behavior patterns because they do care so deeply, just in a different way than how you care about the patient experience or about the bottom line or about trying to keep the business afloat. Their concerns may be different than yours. And so think about that as you're thinking about their values, their motivators, their strengths. How can you maybe help them apply that behavior differently? And this reframe is a tough one. I think observation, self-awareness is the big step. The reframe is much tougher, and then the realign gets even tougher, right? Adjusting their roles or responsibilities to better leverage their strengths. If you have someone who's very introverted and very uncomfortable with meeting new people and connecting with new people, they may not be your best front office person greeting your patients as they walk through the door. So they may be exhibiting certain behaviors because it doesn't align with their natural behavioral patterns and their strengths. So tap into, again, why did you connect them and why did you put them in that position? And what might be a better fit or a better position for them. Or like from our last talk with Hema, maybe have a greeter. Maybe AI will, advance this even more. But can we greet them differently, or can we find other people in the practice to rotate some of the roles and do some of the greeting instead? So just something to think about. And if observing and reframing and realigning is going to be challenging, this is where there are coaches like myself and others where we can come in to help you with this process. So some practical tools to really dig into the strengths-based mindset and to lean into it. Strength spotting, figuring out and seeing when someone has those strengths, calling it out and appreciating it, having those one-to-one conversations, like I said, what energizes and what drains them, and a strength spot, trying to figure out who might have some complementary talents to tackle challenges together with. So what's their natural strength? How does may it be misaligning? And what changes happened as a result? So my call to action, which I always do as a coach, you never leave a coaching conversation without it. One small action you can take tomorrow to try this, even if it's just sitting down and jotting down all the strengths of your team right now. That can create a huge amount of awareness for you that could really help with your challenges around some of these. Just lastly, I love this quote from Don Clifton, who created the Clifton Strengths Assessment. What will happen when we think about what is right with people rather than fixating on what is wrong with them? Can really open up a lot of your leadership to be much more effective and keeping those great employees and helping them shift their behaviors.
Thank you, Aashi. Anyone with questions?
Question. Just because in my practice, I represent the physicians and the leaders that you're talking about. But so you gave some really great advice to implement on their own, but what's if they really just aren't getting anywhere, what's the next best step in terms of, yeah.
Well, so I mean, there's a few different avenues, right? So if they're really not getting anywhere, I mean, coaching is a great step, right? You're bringing in a professional that can talk to them through some of these challenges and help them implement and figure out what in their leadership style is making it difficult for them to do that. Another way is, again, consulting an HR professional, an employment attorney, really looking at do we need to performance manage this challenge out, or are we really exploring everything we can? I think another way to look at it too is just tapping into incentivization. Have we tapped into incentives? I mean, there's still so many strategies. When someone says, I feel like I've tried everything, one of the first things I do in an exploratory conversation is, okay, tell me everything you've done. And 99% of the time, I can find things that haven't been done yet.
Awesome.
So, yeah. Thanks.